It was during our senior year of college that my wife and I first got together. We got into a conversation since we watched the same anime and TV series, and finally we fell in love. To be really honest, I didn't have many moments where I questioned our relationship because it felt so right at the time. Early on, there were a lot of pointless arguments, especially with the males she was hanging out with, but I was constantly reassured. In retrospect, I was most likely gaslighted, or is that gaslit? However, all was resolved in the end. Presumably not the only warning sign I disregarded. In any case, we are approaching our 30s after dating for 4 years, getting married, and then being married for an additional 3 years. Anyway, we grew up pretty different from one another since we met in college. I was raised in the United States, but I later learned that her family was from Ecuador, at least until she was around 12. She grew raised in Washington after arriving. Every now and then, she would share anecdotes with me about her early years in Ecuador, and these tales had a certain intrigue for someone like me who has never traveled abroad. I became aware of Daniel, one of her very close childhood friends, through these anecdotes. It seemed like he had a simple childhood crush on her, but she insisted she couldn't recall if she felt the same way about him at the time. She tended to think that kind of emotion wasn't very common. Though Daniel had added her as a friend on Facebook 2 or 3 years prior, they had not kept in touch. After the friend request, they caught up a little, but soon after that, their interactions on the platform amounted to nothing more than sporadically reacting to each other's posts. To the best of my knowledge, the mess began, at least for the time being, when she received a message from Daniel announcing his impending move to the United States. After completing his education, he had some work experience in Ecuador and was now prepared to enter the US labor market. Great for him. The issue was that this guy seemed to only really know my wife in the US, and he was eager for them to get together so they could catch up and he could also get a better understanding of the fundamentals of life in this strange new nation. To be completely honest, I didn't see many issues with this. When they were younger, they had their last encounter. As adults, they had virtually little communication, at least not face-to-face, and it appeared that she and Daniel were content in their marriage. After all, his wife would be traveling with him. At last, the moment arrived, and Daniel took a plane to the US. Although his flying plan was to arrive directly at Dulles and travel by car to California, he intended to begin working there. To make things less inconvenient for him, my wife offered to cover the cost of his road trip. He decided to travel to meet her, but not before she had promised to pay for him and without first consulting me. Thus, I would have preferred it if he bore the bulk of the financial burden, but at the time I felt like I might have been a bad person because this was a South American guy who was going to start a new life. So perhaps it helped a great deal that he wasn't carrying the entire financial burden. When I took my wife to meet him at a public park, I saw that Daniel was alone. I anticipated to see his wife there because I knew he traveled with her. When I inquired about his wife after the introductions, he replied she had flown straight to California. That gave me a slight uncomfortable feeling, since I had already sort of written off whatever concerns I had because his wife would be there. I decided to overlook it though, since it wasn't important that she wouldn't want to spend the whole day in Washington. And since I really didn't want to be a third wheel and they were probably going to spend the entire day chatting about their old times in Spanish, I left. When they were ready to end the day, I would come get them. They would have the day to themselves. She would tour them around Washington. Once more, she hadn't seen her childhood pal in a long time. I wasn't too concerned about any risks, despite the fact that I was a little jealous that she was spending the entire day with another man. There seemed to be little chance of anything developing between them. My wife messaged me a few hours later, stating that it would be okay if I picked her up whenever I choose, without any prior arrangements. It was the bar we went to most often, and she provided me the address. Once more, I was a touch envious, but it made sense. It's a terrific place for drinking and conversation. Everything would be okay as long as nobody drank too much alcohol. I left the house and headed to the pub she was at around 15 minutes after she sent the message. When I arrived, I observed her and Daniel laughing heartily while seated in their customary spot. As soon as I approached them, My wife grinned and started laughing, but then it stopped. Although none of them seemed particularly eager to depart, I suppose my presence was a terrible omen, marking the end of their wonderful evening. My spouse gave Daniel a hug and said goodbye. After we all shook hands and exited the pub together, I said. We drove back to our house after my wife gave the order to take him home. As soon as I stepped inside the home and took off my coat, I said, "So, how was your day with Daniel?" She appeared delighted to tell me all that had transpired, and once more I was envious. However, wouldn't it make sense to feel delighted to see someone you haven't seen in a very long time again? I put it down to my shyness and paid attention to her as she babbled on about their conversational stroll in the park, her showing him around the museum, their fast lunch, and how they ended up at the bar. At the end of her story, though, I felt a little strange since, from what she told me, they didn't seem to talk about much other than the sports game that was on at the bar, even though she had a lot to say about what they had discussed everywhere else. But I didn't probe since I detest coming across as unduly suspicious and insecure, and there wasn't really anything substantial to be concerned about. That nagging sense passed, though, and the rest of the night was uneventful. My wife quickly said that she might be seeing Daniel the following morning, just seconds before I left the house for work. Yes, I was experiencing much more than a nagging feeling at that point. Our talk went something like this. "What? Wasn't he meant to leave for California today? Are you hoping to catch up with him before he leaves for the bus station? He will postpone his departures by 1 day. Only 1 day. He's going tomorrow. However, there are a ton of topics to discuss, and I'm not sure when I'll see him again. When did you learn that he will be spending an additional day? We had a discussion about it in the bar yesterday, but nothing was finalized. He informed me that he had decided this morning. I just kind of stood there, feeling as like my stomach was going to drop. There appears to be an issue. Although I do think I look better than Daniel, he wasn't an ugly guy. I therefore began to question if she had a newfound affection for him that she had not experienced as a child. She repeated, "Babe," to draw my attention, and I must have stood there for a while without saying anything since all I could say was, "Okay." I turned to leave, thinking I had to get to work. She may have sensed something was off at that moment because she stated, "I have to show up at work, so I won't spend much time with him, baby." As soon as I walked through the doorway, I chose not to respond. Let's go back to my working days now. To be really honest, I was finding it difficult to focus since I felt bad about Daniel and my wife. Since I deal with insecurity occasionally, I had to constantly ask myself if I was overanalyzing the situation. I made the decision to request an early leave of absence from work after failing to maintain mental control. That wasn't difficult because my supervisor loves me, especially considering how odd the request was for me. After receiving permission, I left. At this time, I was starting to feel really weird, especially because I had done something that I'm not really proud of, but it was worthwhile. I parked my car at a shopping center first because I've always been adept at planning things out. After that, I rented a very basic car from Hertz by taking an Uber there. I located a spot to park that allowed me to have a decent view of the hotel's entrance, and drove it to the hotel my wife had indicated Daniel was staying at. Just so you're clear, I could never have driven my own automobile as my wife could have recognized it. Once more, I felt foolish and insane throughout this entire ordeal because I wasn't even positive she was at the hotel. They would have gone out on the town one more day if she was telling the truth. Even if it was simply to chat, my wife would know better than to spend an entire night alone in a hotel room with another man, as it's a surefire way to build mistrust. When I say that I sat in the car for 4 hours straight, I mean it. I needed to urinate, and was hungry, but I was afraid that if I left now, I may not see what I was hoping, or perhaps not hoping, to witness. However, just as it was getting intolerable, I noticed a well-known person leaving the hotel. Daniel and my wife were there. I recall attempting to justify myself to her at that precise moment. I was unaware of their past interactions, even as they were leaving the motel. It's possible that she wasn't in his room and that they were in the restaurant, bar, or lounge. However, She had promised me she wouldn't be staying long, so the fact that she was there so late in the day worried me. I was struggling at the time, between believing in her and disbelieving her, and the struggle persisted until I seen a car pull up in front of the entryway. It was an Uber. I figured they approached it together, and he let her in. And I observed them kiss deeply before she ducked into the car. The kiss lasted for around 10 seconds, although maybe my perspective of time was skewed or something. I'm still not sure how I was able to focus for a little period of time, but I was able to record the final 3 seconds of the kiss on camera. After that, he shut the door, she got inside the car, and it drove off. I was unable to think any more as I sat there in the foolish rented automobile. My mind was stuck. Before I went to return the rental, I believe I sat there for an extra hour. I didn't return home that evening. I informed her that I would spend the night at work because I had to work late. She sounded disappointed, but not afraid. This was something I did all the time. I had intended to spend the night in a hotel, but then I had an idea. My wife would not have cut her night with Daniel short if she hadn't been expecting me home. She was aware that I wouldn't be returning. Although I would still be spending the night in a hotel, it would be Daniel's precise hotel this time. All I could think of was that she would try to head back to the hotel and spend the night with him, and then try to get out early the next day before I could possibly make it back. Without further ado, I returned, this time in my car, and made a hotel reservation. Luckily, they had some open slots. She wouldn't be able to easily see my car because it was already dark, especially from where I had parked it. I entered the hotel lobby and found the most discreet spot I could, with a view of the entrance. That being said, it was a very large lounge, so I wasn't exactly concealed. It had only been 35 minutes since I had contacted her, so I was hoping that, if she was coming at all, I had arrived at the hotel before her. Who does I see enter almost as soon as the notion occurs to me? I had never been too bashful to tell her how much I adored the red dress she was wearing. To be honest, all I wanted to do was gather proof that she was there so I could present it to her later. But at that point, I guess I went completely insane. Before she could go up the steps, I got up and ran to her, giving her a little touch on the shoulder to encourage her to turn around. I will never forget the look of disbelief on her face. We were silent for a few seconds, and I could see her jaw twitch as if she wanted to say something, but she truly didn't have anything insightful to say. I managed to mumble through tight teeth, "What are you doing here?" And she could tell I was furious. "You're here to see Daniel, aren't you?" she asked, stammering so much that she finally told me that she was in fact there to meet Daniel, but that she wouldn't be staying in his hotel room for very long. They were going out together so she could take him to an event, party, or such. I saw her hands trembling, but she was trying to keep them steady against her body. When I asked her why I was unaware of this claimed party, she simply replied, "It must have slipped my mind. I wasn't planning to go before. However, why are you here?" "I'll show you," I replied, pulling out my phone to play the tiniest video I had of her and Daniel sharing a kiss in front of the hotel. Guys, I've never punched a woman and I never will, but I'll be honest, I felt the need to beat her when she stated, "You were spying on me," as if that was the only thing she had to say in response to the video. As a result, all I said to her was, "Don't come home tonight," before turning to go. She attempted to take hold of my arm and make some foolish remarks in an attempt to win me over, but I laughed because I was afraid of what would happen if she made a truly dumb defense. She hasn't returned home in the 3 days that have passed since I left. Her sister, who lives across town, asked me what was wrong, so I know she's okay. I didn't tell my wife anything because it seemed like she was too embarrassed to acknowledge anything. Thus, guidance is now exactly what I need. She cannot continue to play me like this and get away with it, so I need to hit her where it hurts. I'll be following up on your remarks. Edit. I would like to thank all of you for providing me with a wealth of reading material over the past few days. I've had a really difficult time trying to make sense of such strong feelings. But yes, as practically all of you advised, I've made the decision to start the divorce process. I'm not entirely sure how, but I want to take things with my wife a step further. Daniel will also be involved in other plans I have, but I won't reveal them just yet. I'm hoping to provide you all with an update in a few weeks, if not sooner. Marriage, the test of ultimate trust. It's similar to the game of Monopoly, however. Instead of passing go and winning $200, you're accumulating emotional baggage and avoiding infidelity charges. Daniel, on the other hand, is merely the cherry on top, isn't he? Nostalgia for the good old days. You made the decision to let your marriage become a dumpster. Who knew that, like a terrible penny, innocent childhood crushes could reappearance? The plot of Retaliation is up next. Though some might advise choosing the moral high ground, what fun is that? Nothing indicates cold-blooded retribution like a divorce decree that makes her question whether Daniel's allure was worthwhile. It seems appropriate that your wife's sister be informed about her exact family tree. Update. Hello everyone, I'm thrilled to announce that the long-awaited update is finally here, and I'm sure you'll be as excited to read it as I am to tell you all about it. For me, getting a divorce was the first step. My college buddy, who is also a fairly successful divorce attorney, was the first person I called once I had my mind made up. We haven't reached a firm agreement on anything, but the paperwork has been filed, she has been served, and since we don't have children and our incomes aren't that different, it's unlikely that I will be paying much, if any, alimony. That's okay with me. I'd rather be apart from her. Fortunately, we will not have to go to war over house ownership or children just yet. She loved the view so much that I couldn't care less, but the rent was absurd, so I'll leave her with the apartment. Yes, she contacted me the other day, sobbing uncontrollably, and asked if she could come to the house so we could discuss things. I gave her the freedom to speak anything she wanted to say on the phone, but she would not stop crying and babbling about how she was alone, and how she had just made a mistake, among other absurdities. I could have given up through her tears, but all I had to do was give up and consider what she had done. It was as if I had been given smelling salts, as it immediately restored my composure. Since I knew Daniel's name, I had little trouble finding him online. After that, finding his wife wasn't too difficult. All I had to do was inform her about the brief diversion her husband had on their vacation to America. My video was a big factor in making the day. She was upset, but since I was in the same boat as her, just at the other end, I could easily support her. She's a really attractive woman, and we've been talking a lot. While I don't intend to take any action, it would be poetic justice for us both. We'll watch how that plays out. Anyway, I got precisely what I wanted. She's leaving him. Considering that she was dependent on him when she arrived to America, I simply hope she doesn't go back. It took a lot more heartlessness on my part to get at my wife. The first thing I did was gather her closest friends and family, and inform them all of what had transpired, even her sister, to whom she had still refused to disclose the information. I refrained from showing them the video, but I was prepared to act if someone openly chose to cast doubt on me. Next, I didn't know how to force her to resign, but I did thought I could add a little more discomfort to her work environment. Even though the defamation was accurate, I didn't want to deal with it, therefore this was a difficult aspect. Luckily, I know someone who works on a different floor in the same building as her. So I struck up a conversation with him, telling him about my divorce, etc. He informed me that he knew someone on my wife's floor when I asked whether he did. I only requested him to put a seed in that person's ear, and hoped that way rumor would do the rest. If he did me right, I'd owe him lunch, I informed him. When my wife contacted me in a rage and demanded to know why I would inform her employer about what had transpired, you should have seen the smile on my face. I informed her that I didn't understand what she was discussing. I didn't know anyone at her office, after all. I could hear her fighting back tears as she yelled at me, but I just relished it as much as she did. She knew that was true, but she said, "You must have told someone somehow, you must have." She also cried out when I told her friends and family about what she had done, but all I could say was that I was glad I hadn't emailed them the video too. Though to be honest, I'm ready for the divorce hell she vowed to bring on for me. I guess I was too anxious to get even with her, but I should have waited until everything was settled before taking my revenge. In any case, I'm glad to be rid of her. It's useless to hang out with people who cheat. Being single is preferable to being in a relationship with an infidelity. And I'll accept these cards if that's what the universe has handed me. Better things are still to come for me. I appreciate your time, and I hope my experience has given you some new insight. I'm still young, so even if it wasn't enjoyable, I'll do my best to never waste time on a woman like her again. Yes, there's nothing quite like the delightful aroma of retribution first thing in the morning. Filed the divorce papers, served the wife, and looking forward to a new chapter in freedom. That's some next level petty genius. Gritting a group chat to spill the tea to her closest and dearest, then using your inside guy at her office to sow seeds of discomfort. Well done, OP, sowing the doubt in the rich soil of office rumors. A wonderful work of demonic brilliance. There is an entire world out there waiting for a resentful bachelor like you, so why waste time on someone who can't commit? Cheers to more promising times ahead.